Santiago, you're in a unique position to discuss this. Grenoble, École de Management, one of my favorites in EMEA, in our region, not only offers bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs in campuses in Grenoble and Paris, but 12 other sites worldwide. And so they're uniquely positioned to sense global management education trends as well. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tim. And yeah, that's indeed true. We have a global presence. We have a presence here in Moscow as well with RANEPA, an executive MBA, and a master's in digital business as well, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Sergey?
Yes.
So we are going there. I have just a couple of questions before a couple of comments before I go on with my presentation. One of them is that thankfully, I have a psychology degree, so this 95% will probably not touch me. I will still have a job, Benita. Thank you. Thank you very much for reminding me. In case the dean's jobs go down the drain.
To automation, right?
Exactly. And the second thing is that I have 55 minutes for myself, so that's really good. Not that I want to monopolize the conversation. I did prepare a little presentation. I wanted to show that we do some things digital as well here in Grenoble. If I can have this. In my presentation, I will touch a little bit about the traits of leaders, digital leaders, and digital leaders, not only as organizations, but also not only as individuals, but also as organizations. I see that some of those traits have been spoken about here. I will highlight them throughout my presentation. I see that most of you, if not all of you, are very digital as well. I saw a lot of phones taking pictures. If you want to, fantastic. My mom will be proud of that, but you don't need to. Okay? We can email you the presentation later if you want. My email address will be at the very last slide, so feel free to copy that slide, and then you email me, I send you the presentation. Okay? So, let's see. Oh, I thought the technology was not working for a moment. So the first question that we have to ask ourselves as individuals and as organizations is, do we want to be digital leaders or digital followers? And there is an important reason to ask ourselves that question, because first of all, not everybody can be a leader. And a leader is nothing if they don't have followers as well. But in the race for leadership, especially in digital, we have several constraints that we have to take very seriously into consideration, and to see if we are ready to take that role. Which role? The main driver or the co-pilot and the co-pilot seat? As we have seen as well from previous college, notably the presentation about the city of Moscow, digitalizing a lot of operations, notably cameras, etc. There's a huge financial investment many times that needs to be taken into consideration when we try to launch a digital transformation in our organization. As an organization, do you have those financial means to launch that transformation? Or do you want to probably scale down your activities a little bit and be more of a follower instead of a risk taker and take the leading position? There are other factors as well that were mentioned here. Human, notably, we have seen that there's a scarcity of talent in terms of mathematical skills. People with mathematical programmers, etc., mathematical skills and programmers, they're very sought after, and those people, they normally have jobs up, down, left, and right. So there's one of the problems. Can we, as an organization, attract those leaders? If we have leaders as well that we consider leaders in technological, in digital applications in our companies, are those the leaders that we still need to have, or do we need to replace them or retool them? I'm going to give you the example of the former that we still have, CTOs, Chief Technology Officer, in many companies, that they used to have years ago a role that was basically to enable the back office operations in a company. So basically to provide the IT services so the company can operate, the computers run, the printers run, etc., etc. Whereas now we're moving more towards a definition to a role that is called now CDO, Chief Digital Officer. Yes? And that Chief Digital Officer does not have only the technical competences to set up a technical infrastructure, but also the business skills to make the bridge, which is very important, from the digital aspect, from the consumer, from the business side, to the technical side as well, to the back office. So that person understands the necessity, the needs of the front office and the back office as well. So can we actually, as an organization, provide those services as well? Then there are, of course, other material needs that are tied to the financial. We will need servers, we will need some equipment that, if an organization is not capable of providing, then probably is not going to lead us very far in the race towards leadership, digital leadership. And there are other elements as well, if we have the appropriate cultural setting in our organization to go and make that jump and go from an analogical organization to a digital one. There's one thing. We have the, let's see, this, maybe my finger is not working. So both being a leader and being a follower, that is fine, that is okay, we can choose our position, there's no problem there. The one thing that I personally believe is a bit dangerous is to be outside of the race and not be either a leader or a follower and ignore the digital trends that are going on. That can be very dangerous for any organization. Then, going into talking about digital leaders, who are those digital leaders? And I'm talking about individual level and organizational level as well. There's a very nice study that I invite you to take a look at. Is the Harvey Nash and KPMG study of 2017, very recently. That's a study that analyzed, it was surveying 4,498 CTOs or CIOs, Chief Technology Officer, Chief Information Officer, of 86 countries across 5 languages, so pretty much all over the world. Yes, and they presented some interesting findings. Again, my finger is not working. I'm sure the technology is. Okay, there you go. So they came up with 4 of the characteristics of digital leaders, particularly at the organizational level. Okay, the organizations that consider themselves and were considered by themselves and by others as digital leaders, they had a unique focus on growth and innovation. There were people who were going beyond the obvious, beyond the status quo, and they tried to position themselves in always the very latest innovation in absolutely everything, at the level of processes, at the level of products, at the level of marketing services, etc., etc. Then there was another point that was touched on before by my colleague of the Bank of Russia, talking about this need to coordinate the operations between IT and the strategy of the company. So those digital leaders, they were unique as well in that they could combine, they were successfully combining the needs of IT and the constraints of IT and the rest of the operations in the company. They could bridge that divide. And for that is particularly important the role of CDO, Chief Digital Officer, that many organizations are taking on now. Something that was obvious as well from this study is that leading digital organizations, digital leaders, they made investments in technologies, particularly in disruptive technologies. We have seen as well from our colleague, from a minister from the city of Russia, that there is significant investment now in all digital. In fact, they had to go and do public-private partnerships as a way to fund, if I'm not mistaken, if I understood correctly, those digital activities in the city, providing Wi-Fi in parks, etc., etc. So this is another characteristic of an organization. And then something else that these digital leaders could provide was stable, solid, resilient infrastructures. IT infrastructure. All those operations, all those digital operations, they were backed by very solid IT architectures on the back. Okay, we have seen some disasters in some organizations that have cost them millions of euros, millions of pounds in this case. If I remember correctly now, the disaster of British Airways not so long ago, a few months back, when all the IT operations, they completely shut down. They said that because somebody just turned off a switch. Not so sure if that was the case or not, but it was basically a lack of the proper maintenance. A lot of people are arguing what caused this financial disaster for this company, BA in this case, British Airways. Then, if we go to the characteristics of the personal leader, what is? Okay, my finger. What are the different traits that some of my colleagues have spoken about as well here of digital leaders? Okay, so we start and we have that nowadays the environment, the business environment, particularly the digital business environment, is fast. What you see today, maybe you don't see tomorrow. Okay, I remember, for instance, the first cell phone that I had about 20 years ago, and I could never imagine what I could do with my cell phone today. If we look at the speed of technological change and we go back in time to the Industrial Revolution, to the steam engine, changes were much more gradual. They were fast for the time when those happened, but nowadays, if you look back, they were very, very slow. So nowadays we are dealing with an environment that is increasingly fast. So these leaders, the personal leader, they have to adapt to be in a constantly moving environment, in a very agile environment, as we just saw before. And then experimental. If we look at some of the organizations, digital organizations, digital leaders, I could put the example, for instance, of Airbnb. Airbnb, we could all argue that is a very successful company that revolutionized the world of basically in the hotel industry or in the hosting industry. And I don't know if you know the story, but I invite you to become familiar with the story of Airbnb. It's quite exciting. It's very, very young. They started not in a garage in Palo Alto, like some other IT companies did. They started actually in the living room of two people who couldn't pay their own rent. And they had to solve that problem. And they had to also, they came with an opportunity because there was a conference going on in San Francisco at some point, and people were not having enough hotel rooms. So they decided to rent out their living room, just putting inflatable mattresses, inflatable beds there. And that's why the word Airbnb, Air Bread and Breakfast, because they provided breakfast as well for their guests. That's how all started. But before they became what they are today, they had a lot of trial and error, and they had a lot of experimentation as well. They have to be definitely creative and autonomous. And autonomous, especially at the beginning when nobody could imagine how successful their company would be, and nobody would give them a penny. These guys, to show you the sense of creativity and autonomy that they had to even sell cereal. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with the story. They created the famous Obama's O's with a jingle and everything. It was quite. They sold a package that normally you'd buy in the supermarket for $2 for $40, and they got about $30,000 out of that initiative that they could then reinvest in their own company and continue Airbnb. They actually had as well, because that was in the presidential race, they had the McCain, who was competing against Obama, the McCain cereals as well, but I think they didn't sell so well as Obama. Anyhow, one of the things that we have seen as well from my colleagues is a digital leader has to be also inclusive. You have to operate and you have to have everybody on the organization on board with the activities. Otherwise, if we have this disparity and people rowing in different directions, it will not work. The digital leader is characterized by being inclusive, by bringing everybody on board. And about being mobile, I have just seen you now with your mobiles, yeah, taking all those pictures. Nowadays, the degree of automation and the degree of customization and degree of personalization of applications that we can use on our cell phones is absolutely amazing. And all of the companies, or most of the companies, they are providing apps or they're providing some sort of form of mobile access to their customers, particularly in the banking industry. I was in China about 3 months ago, approximately, and I was stunned because they barely use cash. They pay all with their cell phones. It was Alipay. They have two main platforms there. One is Alipay, the other one is, I don't recall which one it is, but two main platforms, but yes. And it's absolutely incredible. I felt actually quite stupid. I thought I was coming from a very advanced environment and economy. Go to China and you feel stupid there. So mobile is another characteristics, and inspirational. Inspirational for sure. If as a leader you cannot inspire your organization, then you can pack and back home. So that's why, Tom, good news again for us, because we can still inspire other people, hopefully. Those who have the skills, if we have the attitude to inspire them, maybe they will still need us. We don't need to go home so fast. And basically being a dreamer as well. None of us could dream what are the things that technology could do today that they were not doing in the past. We have just seen, for instance, in France, Grenoble is in France, I'm not French, nothing against French. Nothing, I love them, but I'm Spanish. And I've just seen, I couldn't vote in the election for the presidency, but we've seen some of the technological advances going into politics as well. I don't know if you're familiar, one of the candidates, the candidate of the left party, was his name Mélenchon, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He delivered one of his speeches in the rallying campaign, not even by video conference, because that's all nowadays. We all have Skype. He was actually a hologram. Mm-hmm. So he was in Paris and in Lyon at the same time. In one place, he was the real thing. They were filming him and whatnot. In Lyon, he had the setup. And I might as well be here a hologram now speaking from Grenoble. I'm actually the real person, but that is something that you could perfectly see in the future. We cannot imagine. We have to dream, really. We are in an environment that is characterized by complete, continuous change and uncertainty. So don't be afraid of dreaming as well. And then the can-do, will-do attitude, because those dreams have to be transformed in reality by people who have this attitude to overcome all the obstacles, to be resilient, to be resistant to this challenge that they will face. Some of the challenges I will show you in the next slide. And basically, we have some of the barriers that most of the organizations they face. One of them we mentioned before, lack of coordination. In some organizations, even analog organizations, we have that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. When the case is very severe, the right hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So it's very important to make sure, particularly in organizations that are going to be characterized by moving extremely fast, by environments that are going to be uncertain, that all the operations and all the services are very well coordinated and everybody is on the same boat. Otherwise, things will probably not work as well as they should. Internal resistance to change is something that we typically see. I remember, for instance, we have an anecdote. When I started in Grenoble back 5 years ago as director of admissions, global admissions, I implemented an IT system. And going from an old system that we had to a new system that ended up allowing us to process 3 times as more applications as we used to, and we doubled the number of students in a matter of 4 years, international students in a matter of 4 years. But there were people who were used to using different systems for 10 years, and to change that mentality, it was not easy. It was not as much a work of technical skills than deploying technical skills, but it was much more coaching and guiding and trying to change that culture of internal resistance. Another barrier that most organizations have as well is the scarcity of talent. And if we see, for instance, the need for programmers, it's increasing every time. The need for people with mathematical and analytical skills, it's increasing, and it's not so obvious that we will be able to equip ourselves and our organizations with these needs. That's why I said before the necessity to commit financial investments to any digitalization activity. And finally is the existence of legacy structures. By existence of legacy structures, I can mention previous systems that were in place, previous processes that were in place, even previous cultural systems that were in place, or in terms of legal contracts, existing legal binding contracts that don't allow us to just drop everything and move on to basically something new. However, like as in the previous slide, I showed the 10 main characteristics of digital leaders, and by having people with those skills, we should be able to overcome those leaderships. In any case, we don't have to be too worried about this, because in the next slide, we have all the solutions. And here I just jotted down 4 pieces of this is not the last slide. The last slide has my email address. That's the one that you have to copy, remember. So here I offer some pieces of advice, some points for reflection, because each company, the solution is not that you have a blueprint that you can apply a solution for every company. That has to be individualized. But basically, one of the main points is, if you want a digital transformation, if you want to be a digital leader, you have to be a digital ambassador as well. So you have to educate at all levels of the organization, from the top to the bottom. And don't forget the bottom, particularly because they are the ones who can put, let's say, sticks on the wheels, who are the ones who are going to be finally developing the activities and strategies that are designed at the top level. So you have to evangelize from the top to the bottom and get all those people on board. So hence the need to be inclusive as a leader. Then one important point as well is to redesign the structures for modularity and agility. We have seen that things are changing very fast. We need to be agile as well, but for that we need to have the structures, we need to have the architectures, the systems that allow us for that. So one of the very less complicated solutions, let's say, is to allow to deploy digital strategies in a modular fashion. Why? Because they can be deployed much faster. They allow us to have quick wins, financial wins, and also credibility wins within and outside of the organization. And by applying these principles, we can move faster and we can be more agile. Then another thing that we have to do is implement a global view and not only think about the back office operations or the front office operations, but we need to make sure that front, middle, and back, that they are working in a coordinated manner and they are integrated. So all the processes, they will benefit as much the outside, the end customer, as the internal customer. Okay? And then finally, create networks, attend events, and try to be updated. Technology, knowledge moves very, very extremely fast, and you need to be updated. So go to forums, go to events, try to read as much as you can, new books, etc., etc. So stay updated. One of the good things, and I see that you are all doing that, is coming to forums where we discuss precisely these things, like the Gaidar Forum. And I do hope that these guidelines or this presentation was of use to you. Now, what I promise you, and now you can take out your cell phones. There you go.
Super. Excellent, Santiago, and thank you for, for sharing those insights and those observations, both about trends and responses, which is incredibly helpful.